The playoff picture is becoming a lot more clear in the NFL with just 2 weeks to go. And a really bad day for New York football. And obviously we're going to start with the Giants, but we definitely have to get into the Jets today as well. So the Giants, it was hard to be too optimistic going in. Since we last spoke, Daniel Jones' injury status got worse. He now has injuries to both legs. So I think it made sense to go with Colt McCoy. It really didn't matter who they were going to go with. They weren't going to win this game. And the Giants got the help on the scoreboard that they needed. Mainly Washington losing to Seattle in a game that looked like it was going to be a blowout, and then Washington almost came back. Dwayne Haskins was the quarterback for Washington, and while Alex Smith is certainly not one of the best quarterbacks in the league, Haskins is a downgrade. No question about it. And so going into this game, while it just wasn't going to be likely that the Giants were going to win, if they did win, they would have controlled their own destiny again, and they would have been, in a tie for first, but technically in first because they have the tiebreaker over Washington. And the Giants were moving the ball. They were. All first half, in fact. And what it came down to was really bad red zone efficiency and questionable play calling by Joe Judge. So I've been a fan of Joe Judge, still am. I think he's a great motivator. I think for where this team is at, he's great in terms of the progression of the team. And I like his attitude. But this was not a great game for him, in my opinion. So the Giants have the ball, 4th and 5, inside the 10. And, easy field goal situation. And I feel like in this game, you kind of had to embrace the fact that you maybe were going to have to settle for a lot of field goals. And the way the game turned, I think it makes Judge look not as bad because it'll be easy to say, well, I guess they had to really go for it. So they do I don't even know how to describe it exactly, but they're in field goal formation. And then all of a sudden, everyone kind of goes out wide. They have offensive linemen as eligible receivers, and Riley Dixon, the punter, takes this. You're not at that point. You're not really sure what's going to happen. Are they going to try to draw them offside? Are they actually going to do something here? And they did. And Dixon drops back to throw, and he tries to find offensive lineman center Nick Gates, and it was an incomplete pass. The replay showed that actually Graham Gano was slightly open, but the point is that play had no chance of working. Just take the easy 3. Just get your 3 points there. This is going to be a challenging game. You want to find a way to come away with some points. And it's just the fact that wasn't a successful play. That really had no chance at all. I respect trying to do something outside the box, but not there. And so Cleveland then, on the next possession, they move the ball a bit, get it to about midfield, and Dexter Lawrence makes a really nice play on a 4th down to bat the ball away. This was one of the rare good moments for the Giant defense tonight. I thought Dexter Lawrence had he was kind of the one standout for me. And he actually was somewhat involved in the Odell Beckham Cleveland trade. He was actually the first round pick that we got. We used Dexter Lawrence for that pick. So thought he was good, but so the Giants get the ball back, and they're in another situation where they could have done some major damage and just missed opportunities. They settled for 3 again. And I thought Colt McCoy was okay. And obviously you're limited when he's going to be your quarterback. There's no question about it. But considering the circumstances, he made the throws. He was accurate. And just my opinion, I think if Daniel Jones played, it wouldn't have made any difference. It wouldn't have. He couldn't move last week. Now he's in worse health. Just not going to happen. And the Cleveland offense did whatever they really wanted to. It was not a great performance by the Giant defense. There was a couple of 95-yard drives. It just wasn't really working out for the Giants. And I just feel like there's no pass rush. Literally, Baker Mayfield had all night to throw. He could do whatever he wanted to. Then guys got open. They only gave up 20 points, but it's misleading. If Cleveland needed to score more, they would have. The Giants' offense just didn't do anything. So that's where stuff like that is definitely not really telling the full story. So another big mess up was the Giants are at this point down 7-3. And they're moving the ball again. And it's a 4th and 2 at this point. So the play before was a 3rd and 5 where they run it with Dion Lewis for like 3 yards. I guess because they had the intention of going for it on 4th, which they did. And they ran it with Wayne Gallman short of the first down. Another situation where you probably just got to take the 3. Like, if it was 4th and inches, fine. I can live with that. But it's a 4th and 2. Or at least do something different. So in the moment, like, as I'm watching that, I'm thinking, you know what? I'm okay with going in. Then I realized, whoa, 4th. I thought maybe it'd be like 4th and 1, but 4th and 2, maybe just take the 3. They didn't. It didn't work out. And, after the game, Joe Judge said that, he felt like in this type of game, like, they needed to try to get touchdowns, which is true, but again, the first play really had no chance. That first one didn't have any opportunity. And then this one, I didn't agree with it. The 4th and 2. So, Cleveland marches down the field. They make it 13-3 at half. And I had the feeling of the Arizona game. They had no chance. They didn't. It was the same thing. I mean, they're doing what they can. They're trying hard, but this team, obviously, no Daniel Jones is huge. There was no James Bradbury tonight. That certainly hurt. I don't think it would have made a difference. I think they still would have lost. But so, Jason Garrett, who I'm not really a big fan of, he tested positive for COVID. So he was not around tonight. But I'm sure that was mainly like his play calling. Obviously, Freddie Kitchens was the one that was literally calling the plays. But they had a plan going in. And I don't think they made too many on-the-fly adjustments. So, just not a pretty night. Too bad that it was a Sunday night football game. I mean, Giants on primetime games at home, it just never really works out. It's never fun to watch for anyone. I mean, I can't imagine non-Giant fans. Boy, that is just brutal. So, now they sit at 5-9. And I'm still pulling for slim playoff hopes. But really, they're going to need help. They're not going to beat Baltimore next week. I don't care who's playing. They're not winning that game. Baltimore needs the game. Giants just aren't going to win. I know they beat Seattle when they had no right winning that game, but they won't. You can mark my words. The Ravens are winning. So, with that in mind, the only way the Giants stay alive going into Week 17 is if Carolina beats Washington and Dallas beats Philly. Two things that could happen. I wouldn't count on both happening, but that's their chance. Literally, assuming the Giants lose, if Washington beats Carolina, Giants are eliminated. Also assuming the Giants lose, if Philly beats Dallas, the Giants are eliminated. The reason for that is because Philly plays Washington. So if both teams are ahead of them, goes without saying, the Giants would be out. So it's not, the Giants' chances are like 10%. That kind of feels about right. Maybe it actually might even feel a little bit too high, but they're going to need to get in at 6-10 because, like I said, they're going to lose the Baltimore game. And really, the bigger picture at this point, just because I think Washington, Carolina is the kind of the key to this division. We'll get into the NFC East, but that's the key. But I'm hoping that if the Giants do go 5-11, that there's a chance that Dave Gettleman gets fired. Got to give him credit for what he did in free agency this year and what was an improved draft, but Saquon Barkley, questionable as the number 2 overall pick. Daniel Jones, number 6 overall pick. We still don't know what that is. Andrew Thomas, number 4 overall pick. He was good tonight. But those certainly, for different reasons across the board, we just don't know. And then he just years of just not doing well. I'm hopeful that if they somehow kind of get killed like they have the rest of the season, that there's a chance he goes. I think the narrative, certainly at 5-7, was like, he's definitely here, what a turnaround. But you go from 4-12 last year to potentially 5-11 this year. Do you really deserve to keep your job? I hope it's at least discussed. I would think it has to. Like, he should not just be 100% safe. So my hope is in that Dallas game where I'm assuming if I had to guess, we're going to be like eliminated by that game, which is such a shame that the Giants couldn't even make it to the last week of the season alive. I'm praying we lose that game for different reasons. Draft positioning being one, but more so for the firing of Dave Gettleman. That is the hope for me. But yeah, not good in Giant land. Plain and simple. And the rest of the division, there's more hope there for me. And let's get into that. So Washington is clearly in the driver's seat. No doubt about that. And they lost to Seattle, which was expected. Almost made a late comeback. They're good at that. It's a gritty team. They go down, but they certainly make things interesting. So if they beat Carolina, they are looking amazing because all they have to do is beat Carolina and the Giants lose to the Ravens and they're in. So this Washington-Carolina game is the key to the division. If Washington loses, that opens the whole thing up. The whole thing up. And then all of a sudden, Philly versus Dallas takes on great, great meaning. So let's say Washington loses to Carolina. Philly-Dallas is essentially like a knockout game. Loser's done. Winner has a legitimate shot. Winner has a legitimate shot. So if Washington loses and Philly wins, then, and again, this is all assuming the Giants lose to Baltimore, and Philly beats Dallas, Washington versus Philly would be a win in it, like either game, either team winning in. Like you could definitely see that being flexed to Sunday night. Washington, Philly, if that takes place. If Dallas wins, then what happens is Washington still controls their own destiny, as they will. Washington's going to control their own destiny regardless of really anything that happens from here on out, unless the Giants pull off a miracle and beat the Ravens. So if Dallas beats Philly, then what happens is if Washington were to lose to Philly in Week 17, which could happen, then Giants-Dallas, the winner of that would win the division. So it's crazy that, like, for example, you have like a 4-9-1 Eagle team still alive. Giants are 5-9, Cowboys are 5-9, and Washington's 6-8. But I think Washington, they're looking pretty good. But we definitely have to keep our eye on that Carolina game. And does Christian McCaffrey come back? I don't think he will, but there's an interesting storyline with Ron Rivera, who was the only head coach he had known in this league. Like, is there motivation? Does he have that call? Does Carolina say, look, we're shutting this thing down? Does Matt Rule say, forget about it? So, as a Giant fan, I'm hoping that McCaffrey makes his way back. We'll see what Alex Smith's status is, but that'll certainly be very key, for sure. So, like I said, Giants are in trouble, but let's shift our focus to the other New York team, the New York Jets. Boy, what a shock. What a shock. The 17-point favorite LA Rams lose at home to the Jets. It happened. It actually happened. And the Jets were up 20-3, and you're still thinking, nah, no way. They're not going to win. They're the Jets. They'll find a way to lose. And they did it. It's still kind of hard to believe. So, as it stands now, Jets and Jaguars both have one win. The Jaguars got crushed by the Rams, and the Jaguars hold that tiebreaker because the Jaguars have a worse strength of schedule. So it's in the Jaguars' hands at this point. And the Jaguars play home against the Bears, who originally, when I looked at that, I was thinking, that's the game the Jaguars could win. And they still can, but it's a big game for the Bears because the Bears beat the Vikings and they have an opportunity. They're still alive. So certainly a lot of motivation for Chicago. And then the Week 17 game is at Indy. And for a couple of reasons, you got to think Indy wins that. They already lost to them once. They don't want to lose to them twice. They lost to Indy, Indy lost to Jacksonville in Week 1. And then also, based on the nature of the AFC South race, there's a good chance, and I need to confirm this, but I think, let's say Tennessee loses to Green Bay next week, which could happen, and Indy beats Pittsburgh, which won't be easy, but I guess that's doable. If that happens, I'm under the impression that they would not clinch at that point. I believe Tennessee is the team, based on a better divisional record, that controls destiny, meaning that it's highly likely that Indy is going to need to win that Jacksonville game. It's going to be of meaning to them. So Jacksonville is really looking good to get this number 1 pick. They are. It's not over. certainly an over. And then let's turn it to the Jets side of things. The Jets play Cleveland, who, I have to be honest, I think the Jets, and this isn't really saying much, I think the Jets are going to give Cleveland a much better game than the Giants did. Yeah, pretty sad. And then the Jets play the Patriots in Week 17, who just were eliminated. Bill Belichick's Patriots did not make the playoffs this year. That also finally happened. So that's another situation where, look, maybe the Jets could win that game. It's possible. So I think it's not looking, things definitely turned. They did. No one could have ever foreseen the Jets winning at the Rams. It really is. The Rams are a weird team for sure, but it is pretty crazy. So now, let's just kind of run with this for a second. Is Justin Fields like a definite pick at 2? What are the options? Do you take Fields at the 2 spot? Do you stick with Darnold? Do you give that a chance? I mean, does what he does in the next couple games, does that mean anything? So a lot of questions now. And because to me, I think Lawrence and Fields are distancing themselves. The more I watch both of them, and it's funny, Clemson plays Ohio State in like the semifinal for the college football playoffs. So you'll get a good look there. But I think that Lawrence really leaps and bounds is better than Fields. So it's awfully interesting to see what's going to happen. You can't put it past Jacksonville to fuck it up for themselves, but I will say, I think that they probably will lose these last 2 games. Maybe they beat Chicago, but things certainly from a Jet perspective didn't work out with Chicago all of a sudden winning against Houston and against Minnesota, putting themselves in a situation where they will still be alive. They would have the tiebreaker against the 8-6 Arizona Cardinals. So Arizona, even if they win against San Francisco, Chicago will still be alive against Jacksonville. So motivation will be there. I'm not a huge Bears believer, but their situation has improved to the point where if you're a Jags fan, you have to be feeling pretty good about your chances of landing Trevor Lawrence. That's looking pretty likely. Again, we thought that with the Jets. We thought that with the Jets situation. So clearly this can very well change. But if you ask me, I think Jacksonville is now going to be the ones that get Trevor Lawrence. And that's also because, look at the Jets. The Jets-Patriots, to me, is Cam Newton. Like, are they just going to kind of close up shop in New England? What's going to happen there? I'm sure they don't, like, this whole Belichick wants to lose. It's not that. I don't think it's that at all. Like, they're going to play hard. They're going to do what they have to do, but they're just not a very good team. So, I mean, the Jets almost beat them the first time. So, that's where we're at on the draft side of things. And jumping back into kind of just the playoff picture, the Eagles-Cardinals, and I wanted to touch on this, Jalen Hurts looked really, really good. I was impressed. Like, against the Saints, it was one of those things where he basically, it was a lot of rushing, not a whole lot of passing. He looked fantastic. If I'm Carson Wentz, I'm thinking, even though I have this crazy contract, I'm going to be out of town. There's a good chance if Hurts keeps this up, I think he's sticking around. I think he's sticking around and, might be like the front runner as the starter going next year. A lot can change. I'm sure, like, if Wentz is still on the roster, they'll give him every opportunity to win that starting job. But it was a valiant effort by Hurts, but Arizona just pretty much did whatever they wanted to against the Eagle defense. Kyler made some mistakes, but Hopkins went absolutely nuclear. Made an amazing touchdown grab to give them the lead. They were able to hold on and got close at the end. But it was a big win for Arizona. Because it puts them in a spot where they control their destiny. They have games left against San Francisco and the Rams. And you have to think that they would hang on. San Francisco lost to Dallas. San Francisco they are bad. Really bad. I don't understand why, like, for the Vegas spreads, it seems like San Francisco gets a lot of love. I didn't understand why San Francisco was a 4-point favorite at Dallas. It didn't really add up to me. Nick Mullins is very mistake prone. San Francisco has some guys on offense. Brandon Ayuk is awesome. They have a very good running game, but the defense is just not great. They've had a lot of injuries. It's just not there. So I think Arizona against San Francisco, and then they play the Rams in a game where it might not really mean a whole lot for the Rams in Week 17. It just might not. So you're basically in a spot where Arizona's looking good, and then the Bucs were able to have it was a classic Brady, Matt Ryan matchup where it didn't matter that Brady was down by, 17 points, 17-0 at half. All of a sudden, the second half, he was just getting chunk plays, 20-yard plays to Gronk, Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, all over the place. The Falcons choked as they always do. No surprise there at all. It's amazing. And Matt Ryan had an awesome game. Him and Calvin Ridley were on another level. I was surprised at how bad the Bucs. I mean, if you're the Bucs, you're great at stopping the run, and the Falcons have no rushing attacks, so just guard Calvin Ridley. I mean, I'm sure there's more to it than that, but it was surprising. But again, and I don't even think people are going to make a big deal about it. It's almost like, yeah, Brady, Matt Ryan, Brady down 17 at half. Yeah, he'll definitely come back and win, and he did. So the Bucs are, inching their way towards clinching a berth. And the Seahawks-Rams next week is a situation where the Seahawks are up a game, but the Rams did beat them the first time. So that division is still up for grabs. It is. But even if the Rams win, let's just say that happens, and so then the Rams would have the leg up. They'd be tied, but the Rams have the tiebreaker. Like I said, that Week 17 situation, they would be playing likely an Arizona team in need of a win, just based on the schedule, and Seattle will be playing a San Francisco team that's in trouble. So all signs, to me, lead to Seattle winning that division. It's not over, but that's kind of where I'm seeing it. And kind of working our way up in the NFC, Green Bay beat Carolina. New Orleans lost to Kansas City. So Green Bay, especially because they beat New Orleans. Now, I will say Green Bay has a bit of a tricky last two games. They're against the Titans, who, obviously the Titans are in a big position. They need, they certainly need the win to a degree. And Green Bay then plays at Chicago the last week against a Bears team that, while, again, I don't think they're a great team, it's going to be meaningful for them, for sure. So, with that being said, I think Green Bay likely will hang on to that one spot. And it's a wide open NFC. It is. Aaron Rodgers is playing at a pretty ridiculous level. But even still, it could go anywhere. But I guess you have to say that Green Bay is looking like the best team, especially having to go through Lambeau is not easy. And the Saints have elements of their game that could be good outdoors, but we've just seen too many times Drew Brees in cold environments doesn't work out a lot. So that's why I felt like the venue for that game, if it is the NFC Championship game, right? There's a lot of weird teams. You have Russell Wilson, the Seahawks, who are kind of up and down. Tom Brady, right? Tom Brady and the Bucs. I know the Rams just lost, so it's obviously not looking up for them, but they've had some good wins. So just in general, the NFC could really go anywhere. Hey, Washington's great defense. Maybe they make a run. So who knows where that heads? But it's just looking like the Packers will get the 1. And then between the 2 and the 3, it's looking like the Saints would get the 2. I'd have to guess based on their remaining schedule. And then I think Seattle 3, Washington 4. I think what you see is kind of what you get. I think Arizona makes it. Chicago does not. I think Washington holds on. So not a whole lot. And honestly, you're going to see, because we're going to get into the AFC, kind of in both conferences. Although the AFC kind of has one situation where I guess it could go either way. But AFC, let's get into the AFC. The Chiefs are the best. It's just so clear that the Chiefs are the best. They won the Super Bowl last year. They had one loss to the Raiders, and I know it's a divisional game, and they actually almost lost to them in Vegas. But somehow it happened, and the Chiefs, Pat Mahomes goes into New Orleans, no problem. Just, he's so good. There's only so many things I could say about him. He's fantastic. So they're going to have the 1 seed. And then the 2 and the 3, it's going to come down to Pittsburgh and Buffalo. So, in all likelihood, there is no more bye for the 2 seed. So it takes on a little bit less meaning. But if both teams, which who knows, if they win their first round game, either team is going to want that game in their venue. Buffalo just won at home against Pittsburgh. So Buffalo has the tiebreaker. So Buffalo could get that 2 seed. So that's kind of what we're looking at there. Pittsburgh should hold on to win that division. With Cleveland's loss to Baltimore last week, that kind of put them out. I know Cleveland plays Pittsburgh in last week of the season, but Pittsburgh plays the Bengals. I mean, normally I do my weekly recaps after Monday Night Football. With the Giants having played tonight and Pittsburgh playing Cincinnati tomorrow, there's no point. I'll pop back on if somehow Pittsburgh loses to the Ryan Finley Bengals, but there's no chance. Nah. So that's where we're at there. And Pittsburgh, just by the way, is not looking very good. Like, Buffalo's on the rise, Pittsburgh on the decline. So, I mean, even if it's in Pittsburgh, Buffalo could definitely win it, but it's important, I would say. And we kind of touched on the AFC South. Titans win, Colts win. So that's still up in the air. But the loser should still make their way into the playoffs. Cleveland gets a big win. The amount of good records in the AFC is pretty amazing. So, you have all these 10-4 teams, as I just mentioned. And then there is the 9-5 Dolphins and the 9-5 Ravens. And right now, the Dolphins have the tiebreaker, but the Ravens' remaining 2 games are against the Giants and the Bengals. Very, very, very likely to win those games. And the Dolphins' remaining 2 games are at the Raiders, who just lost Derek Carr and now have Marcus Mariota, who played pretty well in relief. So it might not be that crazy of a downgrade, but the Raiders are in a position where they're mathematically alive, but they're not getting in. They're not. It would take a million things to happen for them to make the playoffs. And their last game is at the Bills, but we'll see the meaning of the game for Buffalo. It depends on how much they are concerned with, finishing as the 2 seed. There is some value to it, but it's not the most important thing in the world. So, but, everywhere you go, in sort of these percentage-based predictions, the Ravens are even though the Dolphins right now hold the spot, and I believe the Dolphins they control their destiny because they have a better conference record, the Ravens are kind of the favorites to do it. But that could be an interesting race. And then maybe if some of those 10-4 teams slip up, that's the thing. If somehow one of those AFC South teams or the Browns or something, then that could open the door maybe for both the Dolphins and the Ravens getting in. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think, unfortunately, the Dolphins probably fall just short. But that's amazing. The Dolphins or the Ravens could go 11-5 in a year where you have 7 teams make the playoffs and not make it. So maybe that all factors into the fact that the NFC is historically bad and therefore kind of the result is the AFC. There is probably some baked-in effect there. How much of that, or it could just be the AFC kind of dominating on the NFC. That's possible too, but I'd be interested in looking into that. But you're going to have a really good team for the AFC not making the playoffs in a year where they added a playoff spot. Pretty remarkable stuff. So this is the point in time with 2 weeks left where you really get a good feel for where things are. Like I said, the playoff picture, it's a lot clearer now. And based on what happens in week 16 has the effect on week 17. That's why fantasy playoffs don't happen in week 17 because everything's completely different that week. At least this week, for the most part, there's a lot on the line pretty much in almost every game. In 17, not really. There's only going to be a select few games that are going to change things in terms of seedings or who makes the playoffs. So that's where we're at. And the Giants, unfortunately, it really turned. And it felt Pittsburgh versus Washington is really where it felt like it turned, for sure. Where the Giants had just beaten Seattle the day before. They were really looking like they were going to win the division. And unfortunately, they likely won't even make it to week 17. I still hope they do, of course, but if they don't, I really don't mind finishing 5-11 because it can actually get them a pretty good draft pick as well, and maybe gets their general manager fired. So, Giants, Ravens, I made it pretty clear what's going to happen. I think Lamar Jackson's going to do whatever he wants, and I think this Giants offense is going to be in for a long, long day. But we'll see what happens in the rest of the league. We have a Christmas game, Vikings at the Saints. Unfortunately, the Vikings losing today kind of takes a little bit out of that game from a playoff picture perspective, but I'll be looking forward to it. And just wanted to wish everyone happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and I'll talk to you guys next week.